Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I broke out the shirt with peaches on it for this episode. Glad to be talking with comics creator Dave Swartz. Dave, thank you for jumping in, joining. Do you prefer David or Dave?
I typically go by Dave, sort of how I've branded my, artist persona.
Gotcha,
You
gotcha.
know, David works cool too.
All right, all right. Well, glad to have you. And I know that we're talking about the book Confederate Monster, which is a really interesting concept. And I love the art that I've seen for the book. And I also know that you have been active in the world of creating Don't Talk to the Dead, which is a
Yes,
book with a message I can agree with. I can agree with that. Absolutely.
yes, absolutely. You don't want your soul to be accidentally ripped out of your body by a demon,
That's
which is
right.
what happens in that book. So,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, Confederate Monster is my sort of pet project story that I've been working on since 2020. I was able to finish half the book in that time in 2020, 2021. I did a crowdfunder on Indiegogo for the first couple of issues. Did pretty well. However, I had to, I'm a full-time comic book artist. That's my day job. So I had to kind of recoup some funds after the COVID situation. And,
Mhm.
so this kind of got put on the shelf. And I feel terrible because I wanted to finish the story. I felt, like I left a lot of readers hanging. So I have made a plan to dedicate a day a week to my own projects again, thanks to my lovely wife who wants me to keep my sanity. So I, listened to her advice and I followed through. And, I finished issue 4 now, or at least I'm very close to finishing it. I got a couple more pages to color. But yeah, so I'm continuing with that. And Don't Talk to the Dead is one of my day job series. I color that book. I don't illustrate it, but I lend my color theory knowledge to it. And it's a fun ride. It's a great team. I love working with other comic book creators, collaborators. It just it makes me better and broadens my perspective. So yeah.
Love it, love it. Well, you probably answered this question a lot, but curious about how you decided comics were the place for you.
Actually, it's funny. I was actually having that conversation with the very person who inspired me earlier today. So I I got out of college in 2008, and it was hard because it was the recession or the economic crisis.
Hmm, hmm.
And so I had a hard time finding a job. So I eventually got a job doing graphic design. And I worked for this company for a long time. I rose up in the ranks. I became creative director. I did that for a couple of years. And so I had a whole team of designers that I talked to on a regular basis. And so one of my designers came into my office one day, was looking at my doodles, and just asked me, have you ever, done a comic book before? And I thought, man, I've never done a full comic, but I draw all the time.
Hmm.
And so, she asked me, well, have you ever done like a Comic Con before? And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I never even thought about doing that. But I realized like, oh wow, I think I could pull that off.
Hmm,
So I
hmm.
decided I would, kind of make a pitch project for myself. I wrote a little superhero story. It was only, 8 pages or so. I got it printed, went to the show, and did really well. So I kind of took that as proof of concept and, continued on. And 10 years after that, I'm doing it full time.
Love it, love it. Well, you were talking about the work you do kind of full time in comics creating, but also curious about the creator owned space and what
Hmm.
that's allowed you to explore and to do.
Sure. So, I mean, when I first started, that's the avenue that I wanted to go. I wanted to write, draw, create, produce my own stories. And that's how I began. I created a 200-page superhero epic that was, I think it was about 6 issues long, and put it out there myself. Did some crowdfunding to get it off the ground. And again, it did okay, but I didn't really see it as a way of, being able to support me just doing that. So, I kind of switched gears and I decided I wanted to get something published.
Mhm.
So I did a bunch of pitches out there, see what, and if somebody was going to pick up potentially. And so my second story, Feast or Famine, which was like my sci-fi story, is like Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein going on a space adventure together. So that got picked up and it did pretty well. The first couple issues sold out and went into second printing. So, that was a great experience. But I really wanted to, get back into my own creator-owned thing,
Mhm,
after
mhm,
so long, trying to, break out and, working for years, working for other people, drawing their books. So, again, when COVID happened, I sort of took it as my opportunity, to just do my own thing again, which brought me back around to Confederate Monster.
yeah, yeah. But that's a perfect lead into my next question, which is, what inspired Confederate Monster? What's the sort of tagline for the book? If I'm a reader out there and I'm not familiar with it.
Sure. So I tell people Confederate Monsters basically like Cowboy Frankenstein meets the Civil War.
Hmm,
So
hmm,
you get a very different take on this Frankenstein story. It's set 8 years after the original story takes place. And, again, my whole purpose in doing it was, not to rehash a lot of stuff that had already been done. Because, again, when I researched this book, I was really trying to do something different, something fresh. So in doing that, though, I really noticed that there wasn't a whole lot of fresh takes on Frankenstein. It was sort of the same story rehashed, just in different, locations, time periods, things like that, different styles. So again, I think for me, I've always had a love for Frankenstein and these characters and the original Mary Shelley story. But I wanted to kind of put my own little twist on it.
hmm.
And in doing so, sort of practice my writing skills, because I'm more of a classically, trained like artist. I'm not really educated in writing. I did take some creative writing classes in college, but I would say I spent a lot of time when I was first getting into this whole world, practicing my writing, doing pitches. And I still do that from time to time. If I have a cool idea, I'll write out a little treatment, and it may not go very far, but at least again, it's practice.
Hmm,
So
hmm. Cool, cool. So in terms of creating, is Confederate Monster something you see as an unfolding story? Where would you like to take it, and what would you like to do next?
yeah, no, that's great, great question. So um, this story in particular is a 6 issue arc. I have it all written out. I've actually been kind of rehashing the ending a little bit just to kind of punch it up a little bit. But no, the first arc is like 6 issues that deals with Frankenstein. However, I always like to leave the door open. So I have some ideas about where I could take this series further, because I kind of like the setting. I would like to maybe further it a little bit more, and maybe explore other monsters, maybe other, more or like lesser known monsters, maybe. I don't know. But I think
Nice.
there's room to grow for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Monsters never go away, right? Like there's a fascination with that kind of storytelling. So
Sure.
that's wonderful. You were talking about moving from kind of artist to writer and linking those worlds together. And I'm just imagining the effort and the time and energy and creativity that it takes to do single images. Uh, what was it like to think about, okay, now here's the connection between the images as far as like the storytelling when it's your baby, so to speak.
Yeah. So, as a comic book illustrator, it's really my job to take the vision and the script from the writer and, visually interpret it. And
Hmm,
so, in my day job, I get a lot of practice looking at scripts, figuring out how to lay it out, visually. I do have kind of my own like way of, laying things out depending on if it's a sort of subtle scene or if it's an action scene. Everybody kind of does it a little different. But I've developed, my own kind of style approach. And I think that works well when I take my artist hat off and I put my writing hat on and I'm, just typing out the pages, because as I do that, I'm always sort of visualizing how I'm going to draw this,
Right.
or asking myself while I'm writing, okay, how could I approach this from a visual standpoint? Or is this going to be just too much? Or do I need to somehow like rework the scene so that I can actually like really draw it? But it is also fun to get into, the drawing stage and look back on the writing and go, oh, maybe I could like punch this up a little bit and, make the angles like a lot more dramatic than I was anticipating. One instance of that is actually in the first issue where we do a scene that's set at a masquerade ball. So I have all these characters at a party, and I decided I'm gonna do a huge 2-page spread.
Hmm.
But I could have done just a regular angle, but I decided I'm going to do in a eagle eye shot from above and look down at the whole room. So not only drawing all those people and all of the architecture of the room, the furniture, whatever, I actually have a little like string quartet in the corner, like playing.
Nice.
Um, so but doing that in like 3-point perspective where everything's kind of like coming down to a zoomed point and everything's kind of a little extra difficult from the perspective point of view. But again, that's the fun of it, as a as
Hmm.
an artist writer within me, like I can kind of bounce back and forth, and the writer can challenge the artist can challenge the writer. It's fun that way.
Cool. Very, very cool. Very cool. I'm always interested to hear about those aspects of the process. And if I'm a reader out there, if I'm looking for something along the lines of this book, what do you hope that readers take away after they encounter it?
I mean, I really hope that they take away a sense of revitalization with the character, or at least like a fresh new take, something
Hmm.
that makes, the whole pantheon of characters within the Frankenstein story just in taking them to a different place, taking them to a different level. Because again, after all, my story takes place 8 years later. So a lot of these characters are very different than you may remember them from the original, Mary Shelley tale. And I would say one of the bigger changes is, originally Igor wasn't even really in the Mary Shelley story. He came in later, with the movies.
Hmm.
And so, my story is told from Igor's point of view. He's the main character. And my relationship between Igor and Victor is more of a mentor protege type relationship, or like a father son type thing versus like a master servant thing that we've seen a lot.
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
and so in that, Igor is more of a carbon copy of Victor. He's incredibly intelligent. He has a lot of the same skills. So 8 years later we catch up with him hiding in disguise as this Dr. Daniel Schmidt, who's posing as a reconstructive surgeon, giving these prosthetic limbs to these wounded soldiers coming back with amputations.
Hmm.
And so again, like I kind of like doing things like that where it's like a little connected to the concept of Frankenstein, but again, totally different and relative, relevant to that time period. So
And very interesting link to the idea of reconstruction as well.
exactly.
Yeah.
Again, playing into the motivation of that character. If Igor had all the skills of Dr. Frankenstein and he was set out on his own, what would he choose to do? And I feel like he would choose to help people and
Yeah.
help them in a way that's not only unique to him, but is going to make the greatest impact too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I want to find out more about the project, if I want to see it and kind of dig into the details, where might I go for that? And of course, I believe it's on Kickstarter, so curious about any sort of incentives, marketing, any sort of interesting details that you want to add that way as well.
Sure. So, like I said, right now we're in issue 4. So this Kickstarter is really to promote issue 4. However, for those of you who are new to the story, you can get a catch-up bundle. There are, all the previous issues available, either digital or physical. I actually have a pretty good sale going on for the digital catch-up. I think it's only like 25 bucks. And you get, all 4 issues of Confederate Monster. The first issue is actually a double issue. So it's almost 40 pages. Plus, you get issue 0, which is something that came out of the last crowdfunder I did for the first three, where
Nice.
I decided to do is a stretch goal. So I decided, hey, we're going to do this like story that connects the original story to this new one. So it's a self-contained thing. It tells the events of what happens right after the monster's been reanimated, breaks loose, goes on this bloody rampage through the village. And Victor and Igor are just, on the chase, trying to track him down, trying to stop him, trying to, bring him back without killing him.
Yeah.
And it proves to be a little more challenging than they anticipate. So again, the whole story is very robust. There's a lot already already created. And then, as well as the books, you can get some other things from me. I have some issue ones of other books that I've done as far as my day job goes. I've done some books with Caleb Palmquist, who does Dragon Grit and
Hmm.
Unicorn Vampire Hunter. We did a series together called Vampire Detective in Space. So you can get issue one of that. I also have a series that I do with Morgan Quaid from Australia called Bloodsmith,
Hmm.
and issue one is available as well. And then the whole collected edition of my book, Feast or Famine, is also available too. So you can get a lot of different books from me from this campaign. Also, I will say that to connect it back to Caleb's project, because Caleb has a project going on right now, Dragon Grit 2. And so if you back my book and you back Caleb's book, you will get a crossover print featuring my cowboy Frankenstein riding a dragon Franken monster. It's pretty wicked.
Love it. Love it. Love the creative community there too.
Yeah, it's always fun to, play around with each other's characters, do crossover things, support one another. It's really great indie comics.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you've done a lot of talks to share about the book. Is there anything that I missed that you want to make sure to include?
I would just say, make sure that back the book, take a look at my website, sign up for my newsletter. That's where you can find updates about the book in between campaigns. I try my best to, send out updates here and there, just what I'm doing, what's going on with the book. And I'm not going to post things like that on social media as much, because I do want to keep some of it under wraps, but for those who want to follow me and really want to support me, I want to give you a little something extra. So yeah, go to
Nice.
my website, follow me, or subscribe to me, and be in the know.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, Dave, glad to talk comics anytime. I appreciate the time and glad to share about what you're doing
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Jason. I appreciate it.
anytime. Thanks so much.